The radio didn't die all at once, it bled out. First, the squelch of the morning check-in became a wet, rhythmic pulsing, like a heavy heart beating through a mouthful of silt. Then came the voice of my supervisor, Miller. But it wasn't Miller. It was the sound of Miller's voice being played through a broken accordion, stretched, wheezing, and missing the vowels. I dropped my pack near a cluster of mountain laurel, the smell of damp earth and rotting pine needles heavy in the humid Appalachian air, and I stared at the silvered surface of a birch tree. It wasn't bark. It was a vertical strip of mercury-smooth glass, 6 feet high, embedded in the wood as if the tree had grown around a secret. I didn't look at my own face. I looked at the ground in the reflection, and that's when I saw the first impossible thing. In the mirror, the sun was setting, but behind me, in the real world, it was barely 9 in the morning. I should have called it in right then, but there was no in to call. The Monongahela National Forest is a place where silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a physical weight. My boots felt like they were sinking into the loam, even though the ground was packed hard from the week's heat wave. I'm not a superstitious man. I'm a man who believes in topographical maps, the durability of Gore-Tex, and the predictable behavior of black bears. But when I reached out to touch the tree, not the mirror, just the bark beside it, the wood felt hot. Not sun-warmed, fever-hot. My hand recoiled, and for a split second my eyes drifted toward the silver surface. I caught the edge of a shoulder, a glimpse of my ranger's tan uniform, and a sky that was a bruised, terrifying purple. I wrenched my gaze away, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I'm the only one left in Sector 4 this season. They told me the last guy, a 20-year veteran named Aris, had retired early for health reasons, which is Bureau of Land Management speak for a nervous breakdown. Now, standing in front of a tree that was defying the laws of optics and thermodynamics, I started to understand why Aris might have decided a desk job in the city was a better fit. My stomach did a slow, nauseous roll. I needed to move. Rule 1 of being lost or overwhelmed in the bush: stay mobile, stay observant, and don't let the environment dictate your pace. I picked up my pack, the nylon straps groaning, and started hiking north-northwest, away from the birch, toward the ridge where the signal usually strengthened. I didn't look back, but I could feel the purple sunset from the mirror burning a hole in the back of my neck. The trail didn't feel right. I've walked the Black Fork Loop 100 times, but the geometry was drifting. Distances that usually took 10 minutes were stretching into 20. The trees, mostly hemlock and yellow birch, seemed to be crowding the path, their branches interlocking overhead like the fingers of a giant. Every few yards I'd see a flash of light out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't the sun hitting mica or a discarded soda can. It was the shimmer of more mirrors. They were everywhere now. Small ones the size of a coin stuck to the undersides of leaves. Long, jagged shards protruding from the moss. Each one held that same bruised purple twilight. Each one was a window into a world that was 4 hours ahead of mine, and far more hostile. I stopped at a creek to splash water on my face, desperately hoping the cold would snap the gears of my brain back into alignment. The water was clear, running over smooth river stones, but as I cupped it in my hands, I saw a reflection in the pool. It wasn't me. It was a man standing directly behind me, his face obscured by a ranger's wide-brimmed hat. I spun around, my hand flying to the bear mace on my belt, but there was no one there. Just the empty, oppressive green of the forest and the distant, mocking call of a blue jay. I looked back at the water. The man was still there in the reflection, leaning against a tree that didn't exist in my world. He raised a hand and pointed one finger toward the ridge. Then the water rippled, and he was gone. My breath was coming in short, jagged bursts. I forced myself to count to 10. This is how the woods get you. They don't jump out from behind a bush. They erode your certainty until you make a mistake. You trip, you twist an ankle, you wander off trail, and then you're just another statistic in the missing persons ledger. I checked my compass. The needle was spinning, a slow, lazy carousel that told me I was standing on top of a massive magnetic anomaly or that the world had simply forgotten where north was. I shoved the compass into my pocket. I didn't need a needle. I needed to find Miller, or at least get back to the station before that purple sky in the mirrors became the sky over my head. By the time I reached the old fire tower on Big Spruce Ridge, the air had turned thick and cloying, smelling of ozone and wet wool. The tower stood like a skeleton against the hazy blue of the actual morning, its wooden stairs bleached grey by decades of winter. I climbed, my boots ringing out on the metal supports, each step feeling heavier than the last. I needed the high-altitude radio. If I could just get a clear signal to the valley, they could send a chopper, or at least tell me that the world hadn't ended while I was checking trail markers. When I reached the observation cabin at the top, the door was already open. It was swinging softly in a breeze I couldn't feel, the hinges emitting a low, mournful groan. Inside, the map table had been cleared. In its place, dozens of mirrors had been laid out, ranging from ornate hand mirrors to jagged fragments of bathroom glass. They were all face down. In the center of the table was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper with Miller's handwriting on it. The ink was smeared as if it had been written in a hurry or in the rain. "Elias," it read. "Don't look at the sky. If the reflections start to sync up, it's too late. The mirrors aren't showing the future, they're showing what's underneath. I went to find Aris. He's in the basement of the ridge. Don't look in the glass, Ellis, even if you hear your name. Especially if you hear your name." I backed away from the table, my heart hammering. The basement of the ridge? There was no basement. Big Spruce was solid granite and ancient soil. I turned to look out the windows, but I stopped myself just in time. The glass of the observation cabin wasn't glass anymore. It had become reflective. The entire 360-degree view of the mountains was gone, replaced by a panoramic reflection of the cabin's interior and me. I closed my eyes. My own image was waiting for me in those windows. Thousands of versions of Elias, all trapped in a cabin that was slowly filling with that purple, sickly light. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, cold, and smelled of damp earth. "Don't open them, Elias," a voice whispered. It was Miller's voice, but it sounded like it was being filtered through a mile of deep water. "If you look at me, I have to stay, and I really want to go home." I kept my eyes clamped shut, the darkness behind my lids a mercy. The hand on my shoulder tightened, the fingers digging into my trapezius muscle with terrifying strength. "Miller?" I croaked, my voice sounding thin and alien in the small space. "What happened to your voice?" "I drank the water in the mirrors," the voice replied. It was closer now, right against my ear. I could feel the cold dampness of his breath. It didn't feel like air. It felt like mist. "It tastes like copper and old memories. You should try it. It makes the purple stop hurting." "Where's Aris?" I asked, my legs shaking so hard I thought I'd collapse. "Aris is the ridge now," Miller said, and there was a terrifying hollow wetness to his laugh. "He's the roots and the stones. He looked for too long. He saw the way the mountains were before the people came, and the mountains saw him back. That's the trick, Elias. The mirrors are how the mountains look at us." I lunged forward, blind and desperate, throwing my weight against where I thought the door was. My shoulder hit the frame, a jarring shock of pain radiating through my arm, and I tumbled out onto the metal landing. I didn't stop to look back. I scrambled down the stairs, my hands sliding on the cold rails, the sound of Miller's wet, rhythmic breathing following me all the way to the ground. I ran. I didn't care about the trail, didn't care about the briars tearing at my trousers or the low-hanging branches whipping across my face. I just needed to get down. But the forest was different now. The mirrors weren't just on the trees anymore. They were the trees. The trunks were shimmering, translucent pillars of silver, reflecting the forest back into itself in an infinite, dizzying loop. The ground was becoming a mosaic of glass shards, each one showing a different angle of that purple sky. I fell. My boot caught on a root that felt more like a cold iron pipe, and I went down hard. My face was inches away from a large flat stone that had been polished to a mirror finish. I saw my reflection, but it wasn't me. It was a version of me with no eyes, just smooth tan skin where the sockets should be. The eyeless Elias was screaming, though I couldn't hear a sound. He was clawing at the inside of the stone, his fingers leaving bloody smears on the silver surface. I scrambled back, gasping, my hands raw and bleeding from the glass-strewn ground. The scream wasn't coming from the reflection. It was coming from inside my head. A low, vibrating hum began to rise from the earth, a frequency so low it made my teeth ache. The purple sky in the mirrors was deepening, turning a violent, bruised black, and I realized with a jolt of pure horror that the sun in the real world was starting to dim. It wasn't an eclipse. It was the two worlds syncing up. I remembered what Miller's note said, the basement of the ridge. I looked toward the base of Big Spruce, where a dark opening had appeared between two massive silvered boulders. It wasn't a cave. It was a tear in the fabric of the woods, a jagged black maw that seemed to suck the light out of the air. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct I had, every year of training, told me to stay in the open, to find a clearing, to wait for dawn. But there was no dawn coming. The purple sky was winning, and in the silence between the hums of the earth, I heard a sound that broke my heart. My brother's voice. "Elias, help me. It's dark and the glass is cutting me." My brother Caleb had been missing for 6 years. He'd vanished during a hike in these very mountains, and I had spent every waking hour since then, joined the Forest Service just to find him. I knew it was a trap. I knew the forest was using my own grief as a hook. But as I stood there in the dying light, surrounded by mirrors that showed me a world of eyeless men and eternal twilight, I realized I had nothing left to lose. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and clicked it on. The beam was weak, struggling against the heavy, oppressive gloom. I walked toward the tear in the ridge. As I stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. The air was dry and smelled of ancient dust and something metallic. The walls weren't stone. They were composed of millions of tiny mirrors, all angled toward the center of the tunnel. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, on the narrow path of dirt and bone that led deeper into the mountain. "Caleb," I called out, my voice echoing back at me in 1,000 different tones. "I'm here, Elias. Just follow the light." But the only light was my own flashlight, and it was dying. The batteries, which should have lasted for hours, were draining in seconds. The beam flickered, turned a sickly orange, and then vanished. I was in total darkness. And then, the mirrors on the walls began to glow. They didn't show the purple sky anymore. They showed my life. Every mistake I'd made, every person I'd let down, every moment of fear and doubt. I saw my mother's funeral. I saw the look on Caleb's face when I told him I couldn't go on that final hike with him because I had to work. I saw myself years from now, an old man rotting in a cabin, still looking for a brother who was never coming home. "Look at us, Elias," the mirrors whispered. "Look at what you are." I felt a hand take mine. It was small, warm, and familiar. "It's okay, Elias," Caleb's voice said right next to me. "You can look now. The mirrors are just trying to help you see." I wanted to believe him. I wanted it so badly that my eyes began to crack open. I saw a faint shimmer, a silhouette of a boy in the darkness. I started to turn my head, my gaze drifting toward the wall of glass. And then I remembered Miller's handwriting. The mirrors are how the mountains look at us. If I looked into the glass, I wasn't just seeing myself. I was letting the mountain into my head. I was giving it permission to replace my reality with its own. I wrenched my hand away from the warm grip and squeezed my eyes shut so hard I saw stars. "You're not Caleb," I hissed. "Caleb is dead. He's been dead for 6 years." The warmth in the hand vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp sensation, like being touched by a shard of ice. The voice changed. It wasn't Caleb anymore. It was a cacophony of voices. Miller, Aris, my mother, strangers I'd passed on the street, all screaming in unison. The mountain began to shake. The mirrors on the walls were shattering, the sound of breaking glass like 1,000 gunshots in the confined space. I felt the shards flying past me, cutting my skin, tearing at my uniform. I stayed curled in a ball on the floor, my hands over my ears, screaming my own name over and over again to keep from losing the sound of my own soul. Then, silence. A cold, biting wind blew through the tunnel, carrying the scent of pine and fresh snow. I opened my eyes. The mirrors were gone. The walls were just granite, damp and mossy. I was lying in a small cave at the base of Big Spruce Ridge. Outside, the sun was rising, a real sun, golden and warm, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I crawled out of the cave, my body aching, my uniform in tatters. I looked at the trees. They were just trees. No silver bark, no glass leaves. I checked my radio. "Sector 4, come in. Elias, do you copy? You've been off comms for 18 hours. It was Miller. His voice was clear, grumbly, and perfectly human. "I copy, Miller," I said, my voice cracking. I got turned around near Big Spruce. My equipment failed." "Copy that. Get your ass back to the station. We've got a search party looking for a missing hiker in Sector 3. Aris is already out there." I froze. "Aris? Aris is there?" "Yeah, why wouldn't he be? He's been on the job 30 years. He's not going to miss a SAR call. You okay, Elias? You sound like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied, my eyes tracking a movement in the trees. I started walking back toward the station, my mind racing. Had I hallucinated the whole thing? The purple sky, the mirrors, Miller's voice, maybe the altitude, the dehydration. But then I saw it. On the ground, partially hidden by a clump of ferns, was a small fragment of glass. I picked it up. It didn't reflect the morning sun. It reflected a purple sky and a man with no eyes, standing behind me, reaching out a hand. I didn't look at the reflection. I dropped the shard and ground it into the dirt with my boot until it was nothing but dust. I'm back at the station now. Miller and Aris are here, drinking coffee and talking about the weather. They seem normal. They look normal. But every time Aris passes a window, he doesn't look at his reflection. He keeps his eyes fixed on the floor, just like I do. And sometimes when the room is quiet, I can hear the sound of a radio bleeding out. A wet, rhythmic pulsing, like a heavy heart beating through a mouthful of silt. If you're ever in the Appalachian Mountains and you see something shimmering in the trees, don't go near it. Don't touch it. And for the love of God, no matter what you hear, no matter who you think is calling your name, do not look into the mirror. The mountain is still watching, and it's getting very, very hungry. The drive back from the ridge felt longer than the hike up. Every curve in the mountain road felt like a repetition, a stutter in the map. I kept my eyes on the asphalt, refusing to look at the rearview mirror. I'd adjusted it so I could only see the empty back seat and the floor mats. Miller was in the passenger seat, tapping his fingers on the dashboard in a rhythm that didn't quite match the song on the radio. He hadn't mentioned my state, the shredded uniform, the blood on my hands, the hollow look in my eyes. In this job, you learn when to ask questions and when to let the silence do the heavy lifting. But the silence today was different. It felt crowded. "You ever think about leaving, Elias?" Miller asked suddenly. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the trees flicker past. "Where would I go?" I replied, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "The city? Too much noise. I like the quiet. Miller let out a short, dry laugh. The quiet? Yeah, that's what they all say, until the quiet starts talking back. He reached over and turned the radio dial, but it only produced static. A dense, wet static that sounded like moving water. He didn't turn it off. He just left it there. A white noise backdrop to the winding road. When we got back to the ranger station, a sturdy stone and timber building tucked into a valley that the sun only hit for 4 hours a day, Aris was sitting on the porch. He was sharpening a brush axe, the rhythmic shick-shick of the stone against the metal echoing off the valley walls. He didn't look up as we pulled in. He didn't look up when I climbed out of the truck, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. "Find anything?" Aris asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Just some dead zones," Miller said, slamming his door. "Elias here had a bit of a tumble near Big Spruce. Lost his gear." Aris stopped sharpening. He looked at the axe blade, tilted it to catch the light, and then finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, the skin beneath them bruised and saggy. For a second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, I saw it. The reflection in his pupils wasn't the station porch. It was a purple sky. "Big Spruce is a bad place to fall," Aris said. "The ground there doesn't like to let go of things." I didn't answer. I walked past him, through the heavy oak door and into the main office. I needed to document the loss of my gear, but the thought of sitting at a desk, looking at a computer screen, another kind of mirror, made my skin crawl. I went to the break room instead and splashed cold water on my face. The sink was stainless steel, brushed and dull. It didn't reflect much, just a blurred shape of my head. I stared at it until the shape started to move independently of my own movements. I wrenched my head away, my heart hammering. I went to my bunk in the back of the station. We each had a small partition space with a cot and a footlocker. I didn't have much. A few books, some spare uniforms, a photo of Caleb from that last summer. I reached for the photo, but I stopped. The frame was glass. I sat on the edge of the cot, my hands shaking in my lap. I could hear Miller and Aris talking in the main room, their voices muffled by the heavy timber walls. They were talking about the hiker in Sector 3, a girl named Sarah who had gone missing near the falls. "She's been gone 3 days," Miller said. "If she's not in the caves, she's nowhere." "She's in the glass," Aris replied. There was a long silence after that. No one corrected him. No one asked what he meant. I must have fallen asleep, because when I woke up, the station was dark. The power was out. Not uncommon in the mountains, but the air felt different. It was cold, the kind of cold that gets into your marrow. I reached for my flashlight, then remembered it was gone, lost in the tunnel under the ridge. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. I stood up, the floorboards groaning under my weight. "Miller?" I called out. "Aris?" No answer. Only the sound of the wind howling through the eaves and a soft rhythmic tapping coming from the front of the station. Tap, 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 like a fingernail on a window pane. I felt my way along the wall, my hands brushing against the rough wood, until I reached the main office. The moonlight was streaming through the large front windows, but it wasn't the pale silver light of a normal moon. It was a deep, vibrant violet. It cast long, distorted shadows across the room, making the furniture look like crouching animals. Aris was standing by the window. He was perfectly still, his forehead pressed against the glass. "Aris?" I whispered. He didn't move. "They're coming back, Elias," he said, his voice sounding hollow as if he was speaking into a cavern. "The reflections. They're tired of being on the other side. They want to feel the wind. They want to feel the heat." I walked toward him, my heart in my throat. "Aris, step away from the window. We need to get the generator started. We need to call for help." "Help?" Aris turned around and I nearly screamed. His eyes were gone. In their place were 2 small, perfect mirrors reflecting the violet moonlight. There is no help for a shadow that wants to be a man. He reached out a hand, his fingers elongated and pale, the skin looking like wet parchment. I backed away, tripping over a chair, and scrambled toward the door. I burst out onto the porch, the air hitting me like a physical blow. The forest was gone. In its place was an endless, shimmering plain of glass and silver. The trees were still there, but they were translucent, their branches crystalline and sharp. The sky was a solid, bruised purple, with no stars and no moon, just a vast, empty expanse of light. And then I saw the people, thousands of them, all standing perfectly still across the silver plain. They were all wearing ranger uniforms or hiking gear, or the tattered remains of civilian clothes. They all had the same mirrored eyes, and they were all looking at the station. I backed up until my heels hit the porch railing. Behind me, the station door creaked open. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was, or what it was. "It's not so bad, Elias," Miller's voice said. It was smooth now, no longer filtered through water. "Once you let them in, the fear goes away. You just reflect." I felt the cold weight of a hand on my shoulder. I looked down at my own hands. The skin was starting to shimmer. My fingernails were becoming silvered, reflecting the purple sky above. "I'm not a reflection," I hissed, my voice cracking. "I'm Elias Thorne. I'm a ranger. I'm real." "Real is just a perspective," Miller said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "The mountain doesn't care about real, it cares about symmetry." I closed my eyes and thought of Caleb. Not the version in the tunnel, but the real Caleb. The boy who loved the smell of rain and the way the light hit the valley at noon. I remembered the weight of his backpack on my shoulders when he got tired, the sound of his laughter when we found a hidden waterfall. I held on to those memories like a lifeline, pulling them around me like a shield. The cold on my shoulder intensified, a biting, glacial chill that seemed to be trying to freeze my very thoughts. But I didn't let go. I focused on the smell of pine, not the metallic ozone of the glass world, but the sharp, resinous scent of a real forest. I focused on the feeling of my boots on solid, uneven earth. I opened my eyes. The silver plain was gone. The purple sky was gone. I was standing on the porch of the ranger station in the gray light of dawn. The forest was green, vibrant and messy. Eris was sitting on the steps, his head in his hands, his brush axe lying forgotten at his feet. Miller was leaning against the truck, staring at the ground. Neither of them looked at me. I didn't say a word. I went to the truck, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The radio crackled to life, playing a country song about lost loves and long roads. I put the truck in gear and started down the mountain. I didn't look in the mirrors. Not the rear view, not the side mirrors, not even the reflection in the windshield. I kept my eyes on the road, on the cracks in the asphalt, and the dust dancing in the headlights. I haven't been back to the Monongahela since that day. I moved to the coast, to a place where the horizon is wide and the only reflections are in the moving, chaotic surface of the sea. I don't have any mirrors in my house. I shave by touch. I keep the curtains drawn at night. People think I'm crazy. They see the way I flinch when a window catches the light, the way I refuse to look at my own image in a shop window. But they didn't see the purple sky. They didn't see the thousands of mirrored eyes waiting for their turn to be real. The mountains are still there, of course. They aren't going anywhere. They're patient. They've been there for millions of years, and they'll be there for millions more. And every once in a while, when the light is just right and the silence is just deep enough, a hiker will see something shimmering in the trees. They'll see a silvered branch, a pool of water that doesn't ripple, a jagged shard of glass embedded in an ancient birch. And if they're lucky, they'll remember the warning. Don't look into the mirror, because once the mountain sees you, it never, ever lets go. I'm sitting in a small, windowless diner in a coastal town 3 states away, The air smells of grease and salt, and the fluorescent lights hum with a comforting mundane buzz. I've been here for 6 months, working as a night shift mechanic, a job where my hands are always covered in oil, and I never have to look at anything more reflective than a rusted engine block. But tonight, the hum of the lights feels off. It's a rhythmic pulsing, a frequency I recognize from a place I tried to forget. I look down at my coffee, the surface dark and opaque, and then slowly the cream starts to swirl, forming a shape, a silhouette of a man in a ranger's hat. He's pointing toward the door. I don't look up. I don't look at the window behind me. I just pick up my spoon and stir the coffee until the shape is gone, swallowed by the darkness. But I can feel it. The cold, damp breath on the back of my neck. The weight of a hand that isn't there. Elias, a voice whispers, a sound like moving water. The mountains are missing their symmetry. I close my eyes and wait for the dawn. But deep down, I know. The mirrors aren't just in the woods anymore. They're in the world. And sooner or later, everyone has to look. The salt air usually does the trick. It's thick and heavy, a physical barrier between me and the high, thin air of the Appalachians. But tonight, even the Atlantic feels wrong. The tide is coming in, but it isn't making the sound it should. Instead of the crashing of waves, there's a low metallic grinding, like sheets of glass sliding over one another. I stand on the pier, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, my eyes fixed on the horizon where the black water meets the blacker sky. I shouldn't be here. I should be in my windowless apartment behind my dead-bolted door. But the restlessness had become a physical ache, a pull in my gut that felt like a tether being reeled in. I'm not alone on the pier. A few yards away, an old man is fishing, his silhouette a sharp line against the faint glow of the harbor lights. He's been there for an hour, perfectly still, his rod tip never twitching. I want to walk over to him, to ask if he's caught anything, just to hear a human voice, but something stops me. The way he's standing, too straight, too rigid, and he isn't looking at the water. He's looking at the reflection of the harbor lights on the surface of the pier's wet planks. Beautiful night, I say, the words feeling like dry sand in my throat. The man doesn't turn. The depth is changing, he says. His voice is a wet, rhythmic pulsing. I freeze. My heart begins that familiar, frantic dance against my ribs. What did you say? He turns then, slowly, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The harbor lights hit his face, and for a second, I see the old man, weathered skin, white beard, tired eyes. But then he smiles, and his teeth are shards of polished silver. I said, the mountain has long arms, Elias. They reach all the way to the sea. He steps toward me, and the light shifts. His eyes aren't eyes, they're windows. I can see through them, back into a forest of silver trees and purple skies. I can see Miller standing in a cabin that's filling with water. I can see Aris sharpening an axe that's made of frozen twilight. And I can see myself, sitting on a cot in a dark station, screaming my own name into the silence. You're not here, I whisper, my voice barely audible over the grinding of the waves. You're a memory. You're a reflection. We're the only thing that's real, the man says, and his voice is now 1,000 voices, a choir of the lost. The world you're standing in is just the glass. We're the ones on the other side, looking in. Don't you want to come home, Elias? Don't you want to stop being a shadow? He reaches out a hand, and as he does, the pier under my feet begins to shimmer. The wood is turning to glass, the salt-crusted planks becoming a vertical mirror that reflects the entire town back into the sea. The harbor lights are turning purple, the bruised, sickly color of the world I thought I'd escaped. I turn to run, but the pier has no end. It's an infinite loop of glass and silver, stretching out into the dark water. The town behind me is gone, replaced by a silhouette of mountains that seem to be growing out of the ocean. The smell of salt is replaced by the smell of ozone and wet wool, I fall to my knees, my hands clawing at the glass. I can see my reflection below me, but it isn't me. It's Caleb. He's looking up at me, his face pressed against the underside of the pier, his eyes wide with a terror that I can feel in my own bones. He's trying to speak, but the only thing that comes out of his mouth is silvered water. "Elias," he mouths, "look at the sky." I don't want to. I know what's up there, but the pull is too strong. My neck muscles feel like they're being wrenched by invisible wires. Slowly, agonizingly, my head tilts back. The sky isn't purple anymore. It's a perfect, terrifying mirror. I can see the entire world reflected in it. The oceans, the continents, the cities. But it's all wrong. The colors are inverted, the shapes distorted, and in the center of the sky where the moon should be is a giant, silvered eye. It's looking right at me. And for the first time in 6 years, I don't feel afraid. The fear is replaced by a profound, hollow clarity. I understand now. The mirrors aren't traps, they're the reality. The world I've been living in, the world of trees and salt and grease, was just a thin film of oil on the surface of a deep ancient lake. It was a dream the mountain was having, and now the mountain is waking up. I look back down at Caleb. He isn't reaching for me anymore. He's smiling. He reaches up and touches the underside of the glass pier, and as he does, his hand passes through. The glass isn't solid. It's water. "Come on, Elias," he says, his voice clear and warm, the voice of the brother I loved. The water is fine. It makes the purple stop hurting. I reach down, my fingers brushing the silvered surface. It's warm. It feels like a summer day in the valley before the shadows grew long and the radio died. It feels like home. I let myself sink. The transition is painless. One moment I'm breathing the cold metallic air of the pier, and the next I'm surrounded by the warm copper-tasting water of the mirror world. I can see the pier above me, a dark line against a violet sky. I can see the man with the silver teeth standing on the edge, looking down at me with an expression of profound peace. I'm not drowning. I'm breathing the light. I look around. I'm in a forest, but it isn't like the one in Sector 4. The trees are made of pure, translucent glass, their leaves shimmering with every shade of the spectrum. The ground is a soft, glowing moss that feels like velvet under my feet. And everywhere I look, there are people. Miller is there, sitting by a crystalline stream, his face whole and happy. Aris is there, leaning against a silver birch, his eyes bright and clear. And Caleb is there. He's standing just a few feet away, holding out a ranger's hat. "You're late for your shift, Elias," he says, grinning. I take the hat and put it on. It fits perfectly. I look at my hands. They're no longer shimmering. They're solid, real, and covered in the fine, dark dust of the mountain. I look at my reflection in the stream. It's me, not a version with no eyes, not a shadow, just Elias Thorne. But I'm not in the Appalachians. I'm in the place the Appalachians are trying to be. I look up at the sky. It's a deep, beautiful purple, and for the first time in my life, I don't want to look away. But then, I see a flicker of movement. Above us, in the sky that is also a mirror, I see the world I just left. I see the pier, the harbor lights, the dark water of the Atlantic. And I see a man standing on the pier, his back to me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looks lonely. He looks afraid. He looks like a shadow. I want to reach out, to tell him it's okay, to tell him to look into the water. But I know I can't. He has to find his own way. He has to wait for the mountain to see him. I turn away from the sky and follow Caleb into the trees. We have a long hike ahead of us, and the light is perfect. Back on the pier, the man who was Elias Thorne feels a sudden chill. He looks at the water, but the reflection is gone. The pier is just wood, the lights are just yellow, and the sea is just salt. He feels a momentary sense of loss, a phantom limb pain in his soul, but it passes. He turns and walks back toward the town, his boots echoing on the damp planks. He doesn't see the shard of glass embedded in the wood near the edge of the pier. He doesn't see the way it reflects a purple sky and two brothers walking into a forest of glass. He goes back to his windowless apartment, locks his door, and tries to sleep. But in his dreams, he hears a sound, a wet, rhythmic pulsing like a heavy heart beating through a mouthful of silt. And in the morning, when he looks in the bathroom mirror to brush his teeth, he doesn't see his face. He sees a mountain, and the mountain is smiling. The reflection doesn't fade. It stays there, etched into the silver of the medicine cabinet, a jagged silhouette of peaks and valleys where my features should be. I reach out to touch it, expecting the cold resistance of glass, but my hand sinks into the surface. It's not water this time. It's earth. Cool, damp soil that smells of ancient hemlock and decaying leaves. I pull my hand back, but it's too late. The mountain in the mirror begins to grow, its rocky slopes pushing outward, shattering the frame, spilling into the small, cramped bathroom. The walls of my apartment aren't walls anymore. They're becoming cliff faces, grey granite slick with moisture. The ceiling is dissolving into a canopy of interlocking branches, their leaves a dark, oppressive green that blocks out the fluorescent light. The hum of the diner, the smell of salt air, the memory of the pier, it's all being erased, overwritten by the relentless geometric logic of the ridge. I try to scream, but my throat is full of dry pine needles. I try to run, but the floor is a tangle of roots that wrap around my ankles like iron shackles. I'm being pulled back, not to the mirror world, not to the purple sky, but to the now, to the real Appalachia, the one that doesn't care about beauty or peace, the one that is just hunger and stone. "You can't leave, Elias," a voice says. It's not Miller's voice or Caleb's. It's the voice of the mountain itself, a sound like tectonic plates grinding together, a vibration that I feel in my teeth. The symmetry isn't finished. You're the piece that's missing. I look down at my chest. A silver line is beginning to form, running from my throat to my navel. It's a mirror, growing out of my own skin. I can see the forest in it. I can see a hiker standing in a clearing, looking at a tree with a silver trunk. The hiker has my face. The hiker is me, 6 months ago, before I ever climbed Big Spruce Ridge. The hiker in the mirror reaches out a hand to touch the silver bark. "No," I gasp, the word a plume of dust. "Don't touch it." But he can't hear me. He's just a reflection, a moment of time trapped in the glass. His fingers brush the mercury-smooth surface, and as they do, the silver line on my chest splits open. There is no blood. There is only light. A blinding violet light that pours out of me, illuminating the forest bathroom, the granite walls, the root-choked floor. I feel myself being hollowed out, my memories, my fears, my very identity being sucked into the void between the worlds. And then, I'm back. I'm standing in front of the birch tree in Sector 4. The air is humid, smelling of damp earth and rotting pine needles. My pack is at my feet. The radio is crackling with Miller's voice. "Sector 4, come in. Elias, you copy? What's the status on that trail marker?" I look at the tree. It's not bark. It's a vertical strip of mercury-smooth glass, 6 feet high, embedded in the wood. I look at my hand, which is inches away from the surface. I pull it back. I don't touch the tree. I don't look at the reflection. "I copy, Miller," I say, my voice steady, though my heart is a frantic bird in a cage. "Marker is secure. Moving on to the Black Fork Loop." I pick up my pack and start hiking north-northwest. I don't look back. But as I walk, I feel a weight in my pocket. I reach in and pull out a small fragment of glass. It's not a shard. It's a perfect silvered eye. It's looking at me. And in the distance, beyond the ridge, the sky is beginning to turn a bruised, terrifying purple. The loop has started again. Or maybe it never ended. Maybe I'm still on the pier. Maybe I'm still in the tunnel. Maybe I'm just a reflection of a man who looked into a mirror in the woods and forgot who he was. I keep walking. I have a job to do. I'm a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains, and there are mirrors in the woods that need to be watched. Because if you see one and you look into it, you might just find that you're the one being reflected. And the mountain doesn't like to look at the same thing for too long. It likes change. It likes symmetry. It likes you. The trail markers are fresh. They paint a bright neon orange that looks obscene against the deep greens and browns of the forest. I follow them mechanically, my mind a static-filled radio. Every few yards, I see the shimmer. It's in the dew on the ferns, the mica in the rocks, the glassy eyes of a deer that watches me from the brush. The mirrors are everywhere, but they're dormant now, waiting for the light to hit them just right. I reach the creek where I saw the man in the water. I don't stop to splash my face. I don't look at the pool. I keep my eyes on the path. But as I cross the small wooden bridge, I hear a sound. Tap, tap, tap. It's coming from under the planks, a fingernail on a window pane. I don't stop. I don't look down. I just keep walking, my boots thudding rhythmically on the soil. Elias, a voice whispers from the water. The purple sky is coming. Are you ready? I don't answer. I just keep walking. Because the one thing I've learned about the mountain is that it only has power if you give it your eyes. If you don't look, it's just stone and trees. If you don't look, the mirrors are just glass. But God, it's hard not to look. Especially when you know that on the other side your brother is waiting. I reach the base of Big Spruce Ridge. The tear in the rock isn't there. It's just solid granite, covered in lichen and moss. I stand there for a moment, looking at the stone. I could take my brush axe and start chipping away. I could find the tunnel. I could find the mirrors. I could go back to the purple sky and the glass trees. But I don't. I turn around and head back to the station. Miller is waiting for me on the porch. He's drinking coffee, his face a mask of weary professionalism. He looks at me, and for a second I see the reflection in his eyes. It's a forest, a real forest, green, messy, and beautiful. You look like you've been through hell, Thorne, he says, handing me a mug. Just a long day, I reply, taking a sip. The coffee is bitter, hot, and perfectly mundane. Yeah, Miller says, looking out at the mountains. They have a way of doing that to you. We sit in silence for a while, watching the sunset. It's a normal sunset, orange, pink, and gold. There is no purple. There is no bruised black. But as the light fades and the shadows grow long, I see a movement in the trees, a silver flash, just for a second. I don't look at it. I look at my coffee. I look at Miller. I look at the neon orange trail markers. I'm still here. I'm still Elias Thorne, and for now, that's enough. But I know that somewhere, in a mirror I haven't seen yet, the other Elias is waiting. He's standing under a purple sky, holding a shard of glass, and he's looking for me. And one day, I might just look back. The night at the station is quiet, but it's a fragile quiet. Every creak of the timber, every rustle of the wind outside feels like a question being asked. I'm lying on my cot, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying not to think about the photo in the locker or the window in the office. Miller and Aris are asleep. They're breathing a rhythmic counterpoint to the silence. But I can't sleep. The mountain is too loud. It's a low-frequency hum that vibrates in my bones, a sound that tells me the symmetry isn't finished. I get up and walk to the kitchen. I don't turn on the lights. I don't need them. I know this place by heart. I find the kettle and put it on the stove, the blue flame of the burner the only light in the room. I stand there, watching the flame, its flickers reflected in the polished surface of the stove. And then, I see it. In the reflection of the flame, There's a man standing behind me. He's not a ranger. He's not Caleb. He's me, but his eyes are silvered glass. He's holding a shard of the mirror I broke on the pier, and he's reaching out to touch my shoulder. I don't move. I don't turn around. I just watch the reflection. "It's time, Elias," he says, his voice a wet, rhythmic pulsing. "The mountain is waking up." I look at the flame, then back at the reflection. "I'm not going back," I whisper. "You never left," he says, and he smiles. His teeth are shards of polished silver. "You're just the reflection that thinks it's a man. But the glass is breaking, Elias. And when it's gone, there will be nothing left but the purple sky." He reaches out, his fingers brushing my shoulder, and I feel a sudden glacial chill. The blue flame of the stove turns a violent purple. The kitchen walls begin to shimmer, turning into translucent glass. The smell of coffee is replaced by the smell of ozone and wet wool. I close my eyes and hold on to the memory of the salt air, the sound of the waves, the feeling of the sun on my face. I pull the memories around me like a shield, a barrier against the cold. "I am Elias Thorne," I hiss, my voice a plume of dust. "I am a man. I am real." The chill on my shoulder intensifies, a biting, frozen weight that seems to be trying to freeze my very thoughts. But I don't let go. I hold on to the memories until they're all I am. When I open my eyes, the kitchen is normal. The flame is blue. The walls are wood. The man in the reflection is gone. But on my shoulder, where he touched me, there's a small silvered handprint. It doesn't wash off. It doesn't fade. It's a mirror, growing out of my own skin. I look at the handprint, then at the window. The sun is starting to rise over the mountains. It's a real sun, golden and warm. But as it hits the trees, I see the shimmer, thousands of mirrors all waking up, all looking at the station. I'm still a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains, and my shift isn't over yet. I pick up my brush axe and head out the door. There are trees that need to be cleared. There are trails that need to be marked, and there are mirrors that need to be broken. Because as long as I'm here, the symmetry will never be finished. The mountain will just have to keep waiting.